At this juncture, it's just 1 week post-match, and I can tell you that I'm getting a lot of requests for support for those who contact me, and say or write, "Dr. Parker, I didn't match, and what can I do to improve my chances the next time round?" I know this is a really hard time for many people, and so I decided to put together a brief but fairly comprehensive guide to help those of you who are in this disappointing position, maybe a little bit refocused and restarted again. You can see that the subtitle of my talk is Reflect, Refocus, Reassess, and Recover, and that's truly because I believe that there's a process that one has to go through when faced with disappointing results, so as to really come out on the other side with renewed interest, enthusiasm, hope, and a direction or possibly a change in direction. So let me give you the advice that I can about this. First, reflect. When you think about it, match status is all or none. You're either matched or you're unmatched. And it really often feels like success or failure. But when you look at progress towards a goal, your goal being getting into residency in the United States, the progress towards that goal is a graded process. It's not binary, it's not either progress or not. When you look at the graphic below, you can see that if your starting point is A, sometime when you first decided that you were going to apply for residency in this country, and now you find yourself not in the matched category, that self defined target or goal that you set for yourself, but the unmatched, where you missed your mark, you often don't give yourself credit for that long journey that you've already taken to get from A to B. Think about it. You've gone through USMLE step preparation, testing, all the way to completion. You've written your ARIS application, your personal statement. You've figured out who to get your letters of recommendation from. You've had volunteer experiences, sometimes that stretch over years. You've added research or publications to your resume. You've possibly gone and got a postgraduate degree to try to enhance your application. And then once application season comes, some of you have done mock interviews, you've done real interviews, you've put together a rank order list if you were lucky enough to get interviews. You went through the match and even maybe through SOAP. That sounds like a lot of stuff to me. And so even though you haven't gotten to that target point, think about how far you've come. So I would say to you, grieve the loss of not being matched because it does feel like a loss. You expected something different. And unfortunately, you have to cope with this disappointment. But please try to refocus on the gain instead of the gap. Focus on that gap, that gain. So I recently wrote a newsletter which I called Mind the Gap, Measure the Gain, which was actually styled after Dan Sullivan's book called The Gap and the Gain. And I find this an incredibly useful tool when we think about anything that's going on in our life, when we think about the progress we've made, even though we may not have gotten to the end point, whatever that end point is. And by the way, that end point in life just keeps moving further and further away, right? So anyway, mind the gap, measure the gain. That would be my strongest advice to you, because when you think about all that you've done, it really feels like achievement and success. It certainly does not feel like failure. There are four major components in my mind when you reassess your application. The first is commitment, belief, and support, followed by your match strategy, then your specific application strengths and weakness, and your interview skills. There may be some other things in there, but I've distilled it into 4 categories. Reassess your commitment, belief, and support. So when you are ready to take a deep dive, I want you to put your judgment aside and start your reflection and ask yourself, were you really 100% committed to this process? Without 100% commitment, it's very difficult to find yourself in a successful position. Did you truly believe that you could succeed? If you don't have the confidence and the belief that you can succeed, then sometimes, you jeopardize your own success. Did you put forth the maximal effort? Did you have the information and resources you needed? Whether or not they were available or not, I'm just asking you, did you have that information? Did you have support from friends, family, colleagues, and professionals? Or did you go this alone or with weak support? Did you end up rushing to get your application completed for whatever reason? Sometimes life happens. Financial issues, come up, or there's illness in a family, or something that you couldn't have predicted. But did you get your application completed in time and without rushing? And did you have a professional review for your application, recognizing that many people don't? They simply believe that they can't afford it. Next, in terms of the reassessment, after you've gone through those other questions, is really thinking a little bit about your match strategy. I'm not talking about the specific places you necessarily applied to, but the primary question, are you sufficiently competitive for the specialty to which you applied? There's some specialties that are incredibly competitive for US grads, for non-US grads, even more so. And if you're not competitive, then it's very difficult to be successful. Do you know the available NRMP data for your specialty? I believe that knowing the data is incredibly important. It empowers you. It teaches you a lot about what's necessary, and it gives you an informed um, viewpoint on what the possibilities are. Did you also research programs to determine if your application was sufficiently competitive for them as much as you could tell? They have certain scores, they have certain things that they look for. Do you believe you were sufficiently competitive? Did you apply to a reasonable number of programs? What is reasonable? I don't know, but every year I do see people who, generally for financial reasons, but sometimes for other reasons, apply to a very small number of programs. And, part of this whole thing is a numbers game. Did you use your program and geographic signals wisely? Every year I see people who don't. So that's important. And then were you open to considering other specialties? Did you actually even consider where what your application strengths were and whether or not your strengths sort of jived with a particular specialty or not? Now we'll move into the actual ARIS application because this is usually what many people really want to know about. Where are the opportunities to improve my application? That's what you should be asking. You shouldn't be asking, are there opportunities, but where are there opportunities? Because I believe that there are always opportunities to improve your application. And in an application, I'm considering that we have the ARIS application, your personal statement, and your LOR. So those are all part and parcel of that application. So let's start with the ARIS application itself. Now, there are going to be some changes in the ARIS application for 2024-25 for the 25 match season. So I don't think they're going to be that substantive, but they are going to be some changes, and all the comments that I'm making here do not reflect what those changes are. I have some knowledge about what those may be, but not any specifics. So I just wanted to provide that caveat. So first things first, grammar, punctuation, capitalization. Every year I see many applications that have grammatical errors, punctuation errors, capitalization errors, spelling errors. really, this can't be the case. So that's number one. Number two, your ARIS application, very shortly into the application, as you know, comes the geographic signaling issues. So you have geographic preferences and then setting your preference that you do. There are individuals who don't choose a preference. They say they have no preference because I think they felt like if they told, for instance, the Northeast that they would want to come to the Northeast, then maybe the Southeast would think that they didn't want to come to the Southeast. So what they did was they declared no preference. And you know what? That was not a good strategy. It was not a strategy that was rooted in knowledge about how the NRMP works. Because indeed, if you set preferences, geographic preferences increased by fourfold, the chances that you were going to get invited for an interview if one of the programs that you selected was within that geographic zone. So it was important. All of these are little things that they're additive, I feel, to try to help you to get across the finish line. They ask you for a reason why there's a geographic preference. Provide something that makes sense, that makes the program look at your application and say, oh, okay, so if we invite this person for an interview and we like them, there's a reason for them to pick our program because it lies in X region and they really, they have family in this region. They love to ski. They love something about it that is compelling and it's going to make them want to stay in that area, or so it seems. Okay. Next, postgraduate training. I've seen people omit the fact that they had postgraduate training. I'm not sure if they didn't understand the question, but I've seen people not put in residencies that they've done and other things that they've done because they didn't maybe know where to put it. But please don't omit things if you have postgraduate training. Often it's a plus. Membership awards and accomplishments. You would think that everybody would be right on these things, but I can tell you that some people are not. When I'll be talking to them about let's say in their interview, when we do mock interviews and I ask them a lot of questions about themselves, I come to find out all these awards and stuff that they've received, which aren't anywhere on their application, and they just seemingly forgot. Sometimes quite prestigious things. So don't forget about anything that could elevate your application or be interesting about your application. You have those 10 experiences that you can write about. And so you need to ask yourself before reapplication, do I have sufficient and meaningful experiences? Of course, everybody wants to see U.S. clinical experience. Not that you can't get a residency without it, but it certainly is helpful, very helpful indeed if you have it. But so too are work and volunteerism and extracurricular activities. All those can be sufficient, can be meaningful experiences that you would include, and you just have to figure out which ones to include. Make sure that you complete all areas of that worksheet because for each experience there is, if you recall, certain questions, mostly from drop-down screens that you have to add, and specifically the primary focus area of the experience and key characteristics of the experience. And I would tell you that that's important. You want to pick things where they aren't all the same. They don't all have the same kind of key characteristic. You want things that are different and things that would be important for the particular specialty that you are applying to. So select those carefully with consideration. When you do write about your selected experiences and you have a little over 1,000 character limit to do so, make sure that what you write about actually aligns with the key characteristic that you've chosen to highlight. And make sure that when you do that, you just have one or two short, very concise, easily accessible paragraphs that will really entice the reader Please don't give a list of bulleted items that you've done, that you've worked in a doctor's office, and then go list all the various duties that you have. That is not a good use of this space whatsoever. You also get to choose from those 10 experiences which ones were the most meaningful. And so that is another opportunity for you to really select those which you believe really can present you in the best light, are unique, and certainly, as it says, that you found meaningful. There are ARIS instructions that I have printed here. I've copied them verbatim, and realize every year I see people who just don't do this. They don't follow the ARIS instructions. They're so committed to bulleted points and describing things in terms of skill sets instead of really reflecting on the experience itself and talking about how it influenced you and why it was meaningful. There is also that special part of the application where you can discuss impactful experiences. And these are meant to be really exceptional challenges or hardships that you may have gone through, that may have impacted you significantly in one way or another, or your ability to apply for residency, etc. It is not a requirement. It should only be added if it's applicable. And I can tell you that you will know if you qualify. They invite you to discuss such things as family, financial, education, community types of things, general life experiences. And the only thing that I would say to you is consider carefully what you share. Some people go overboard and they want to share things about their life that are deeply personal, and they think that, this is these are they're very important things, no doubt, but sometimes they may not really act in your favor. So consider carefully what you indeed share about yourself. Publications, the section on publications. So of course, part of the, reassessment is, do you have enough publications? Do you have research? What does that mean? What is enough? And there is wide variance among specialties. I would tell you, go to the NRMP data and look at it. There's a specific document that you can look at that will show you, for IMGs, let's say for US and for non-US IMGs, amongst the people that applied and matched versus didn't match, what was the number of articles? What was the number of publications that individuals had? You can get a sense of how important that metric is. When you do enter your publications, please label your entries appropriately, and please provide the correct citations in the proper format. I see capital letters. I see things that are cited incorrectly. My understanding is the new application may help to standardize those citations, but it frankly just looks really sloppy if you don't use one of generally there are two standard forms that we use for citations, and if you don't use those forms, it really doesn't reflect well. Okay, personal statement. Your personal statement goals are to tell your story, and tell your story in a compelling fashion. Bring the reader in within the first paragraph. You need to make sure that your writing is excellent. I tell people every sentence matters. If that sentence doesn't help to push your application forward and interest the reader, then it is an empty filler sentence. So you need to very dispassionately look at every sentence and say, does this really add to my application or not? Avoid redundancy, both words that are repetitive throughout the personal statement and thought. Sometimes where people repeat things over and over, and it's just not helpful, and it looks as if you don't have anything else to say. Ensure correct grammar, punctuation, precision of word choices, and pretty much avoid the passive voice. Your personal statement should absolutely highlight in a very concise, beautiful way your overall value and really allow you to sell yourself as a candidate. So there is a sense that you really need to be authentic, and a little bit original in this, but not pushing the boundaries. I mean, don't write your personal statement as a poem. Don't write your personal statement as a movie. Don't disclose things in your personal statement that is incredibly personal about you. People have sent me personal statements when they talk about their divorces or their illnesses. And these are probably things that are best left unsaid, or if they're talked about, should be talked about briefly and not occupy, much of the personal statement. Finally, did you seek a professional review for your personal statement? A lot of people have their friends review them, and I believe that while friends are really well intended, they often don't know exactly what is important in a personal statement. And now we're up to interviewing skills. So you have to go back and think about, how were your interview skills this round? Were you truly prepared for your interviews? What does being prepared mean? It means, did you research the program? And if you knew who was interviewing you, did you at least look them up in advance? Did you have a mock interview at least once with videotape so that you could look at your performance and assess and adjust? Did you consider using AI interview training, which you can do, which helps you for specific problem areas? It doesn't teach you how to interview, but it helps you to overcome certain types of things that may be a problem for you that a professional, interviewer, assessor could tell you. When you think back about your interviews, and you think about specific portions of your interviews, how did you handle the tell me about yourself question, which is generally the opening sales pitch? And if you fall flat with this one or ask, get nervous, have to repeat it again, it's just not a good opener. So that definitely needs to be rehearsed until it's natural. Were you able to integrate storytelling into your interview in a way that was convincing and natural? Did you use a STAR formula for situational and behavioral questions? In other words, did you use the situation, the task, what actions you took, and the result to stay on track, to help you stay on track during those kinds of questions? Remaining on track is a really important thing in an interview, because if you don't and you go off and you use a lot of time talking about something that isn't specifically what the interviewer has asked you, you're essentially taking over that interview, and nobody really likes that as an interviewer. Did you prepare strong questions for the interviewer? There's some people who have some really odd notions about questions that they think they should ask the interviewer. And I have my own take on how to create questions that are actually help to sell you even more. Were you comfortable and confident during your interviews? And a lot of this is practice. Finally, two more things. Were you likable? Did you demonstrate this thing called likability, which means, did you appear authentic? Were you positive and enthusiastic about that interview? Were you engaged? Did you connect with your interviewers? Sometimes it's hard, I know, but there are ways and skills to try to get you to better connect with people. Were you reliable? Did you show up on time? Did the stories you tell support that you're a reliable, accountable person? And were you respectful? Were you respectful at the beginning of the interview? Were you respectful by not interrupting? Were you respectful at the end by thanking the interviewer for allowing you to have the opportunity to speak with them that day? Those are all important things that have to do with likability. And then finally, during the interview, Did you articulate the specific value you would bring to the program? Did you show them how you're going to help make their program shine? Because if you didn't, you lost an opportunity there, because that really is what this is all about. You are trying to present your skill set and show them how you're a terrific match for their residency program. So now you've reflected and you've refocused and you've reassessed. What's next? Well, I think the next part is really about trying to help you to move forwards, because this portion, the reflect, refocus, and reassessment, is really to help you gain awareness, to help you move into growth, and then really recovery from this process. And that path forward with recovery after an unmatched cycle is really different for everyone. Remember, please, that you're not alone. About 40% of IMGs every year don't match in a given cycle. And so sometimes it unfortunately takes more than one or even two cycles to match. It really becomes an endurance thing. What are the next steps for individuals? Well, sometimes people decide they're going to reapply the next cycle to the same specialty, may enhance their application, figure out some things that they want to do differently, but they're committed to that specialty, feel that they're competitive and are going to do that. Others actually reapply the next cycle, but they may apply to different specialties or a mix of specialties. I've had individuals that I've talked to that we've explored various other options in various specialties, and they actually started to feel like they had more synergy with some other specialty than the one that they had originally kind of chosen. So that's interesting, because there actually are some unusual types of specialties out there that you may really find that you have an affinity for. Some individuals decide they're going to defer reapplication. They want to get more work. They want to come and they have the opportunity to get U.S. clinical rotations. They decide, maybe I'll do a residency in my country for a period of time. They feel like they need to get more publications or research, and they figure out a way to do that, or they go on and decide to get an MPH or some advanced degree, and all of this in consideration and with the strategy of applying for a residency in the future. And then some people elect not to reapply. It's the end of the road for them. They've given it their all. And with this type of reflection and reassessment, they basically decide that they don't want to do anything more. They want to, they want to move forward, but not into a position in the U.S. So, two final comments. The first is that I would urge people to try to get some kind of professional application support if you're able. And it's not just because that's what I do, honestly, but I do think that after an unmatched event, people really need a person who can provide you with a more objective assessment that can really look at the strengths and weaknesses of your application and really help you to find opportunities where you can strengthen your application. Help you in the designing of a potential match strategy for the next cycle, which may be a more successful one, and for sure improve your interview skills. Because if you get interviews, that's the first step. Once you get interviews, you are in a situation where doing well in those interviews is really critical, because doing well in those interviews has to do then with where you're going to be placed on a program's rank order list. And that is clearly one of the most important things at that point that would allow you to then be successful. So in closing, I would hope that, although I know being unmatched is a very traumatic experience for a lot of people, I would hope that at least with time, most of you can believe or try to believe that going unmatched is an opportunity to begin again, this time with greater awareness, knowledge, and experience. Thanks for joining me today. My goal at My Application Coach is to deliver meaningful content in bite-sized segments. I'd be honored if you'd hit the button below to subscribe to my YouTube channel and graciously provide your comments. I also invite you to check out my website, imgspecialist.com, where I offer personalized services assisting serious applicants with mock interviews, ERIS and personal statement review, and much more. Thank you.